As I said, when I was rather young in 1982, 1983, I served in the army. And we had, well, not myself, I mean, the company I was serving with, the Carabinieri, that is a kind of a special forces of the Italian army. They were in charge of some radar installations on top of this mountain. It is called the Monte Amiata. It is here in the southern part of Tuscany. So this is Tuscany, Florence is here. This is the Elba Island, where Napoleon was exiled. And on top of this mountain, we had some radar installations. And the High Command asked me if I knew something about potential hazards for the personnel operating 24 hours a day over there, potential hazards from radars, from microwaves that were used for the radars of those days. Why did they ask me something like that? Because we knew that since the 70s, in the Soviet Union, a strange syndrome had been described. It was called the microwave syndrome, and it was quite common, unfortunately, among military personnel working with radio and radar equipment. The subject showed symptoms rather vague that include fatigue, dizziness, headaches, problems with concentration and memory, and sleep disturbances. In about the same time period in the 80s, when I was serving, the Swedes also reported similar symptoms in people who were in front of the old cathode monitors of those days. Flushing, burning, and tingling of the skin, especially on the face that was directly exposed, but also headaches, dizziness, tiredness, photosensitivity. And these reports, they came from almost all over the world, or at least from all over Europe, because also from Finland. Nowadays, we know about the Havana syndrome. That is a kind of a strange syndrome occurring or hitting military and civilian personnel of US embassies. Firstly, it was described in Havana, Cuba, but also somewhere else. And in this year, the Biden administration called these unexplained health incidents. And they are affecting a number of civilian and military personnel. I read also near the White House in Washington, D.C., USA. So what are all these things? By the way, about 40 years ago, we thought we had solved these kind of mysteries that are not mysteries at all. But this is a topic for another time. What I wanted to say is that it is since the early 80s, I became involved with the hazards or potential hazards deriving from exposure to electromagnetic fields. Going 20 years forward, when I was working at University of Florence, Italy, we began to do research about the potential noxious effects of the mobile telecommunication devices of those days. If you're old enough, you remember those Nokia big telephones of 20 years ago. And that is actually when we published this article in Oncology Research. So just the title of the journal where we published the article tells you something dedicated to research in cancer. And here we exposed human skin fibroblasts, that is cells of the human skin, to a common Nokia cell phone of those days with a regular phone call of about 1 hour. And then we checked and we saw a number of very interesting things, because we saw that the DNA of these cells changed, not that it mutated, so no mutations like if they were exposed to ionizing radiations like X or gamma rays, but the way the DNA was read was changing. That is, new genes, new proteins were expressed, proteins that signaled some type of damage. So the cells were trying to protect themselves from these Nokia phones. Well, not because it was a Nokia. If it would have been a Motorola of those days or some other brand, probably would have been the same. And also they changed their shape. Morphology means shape. So these cells were truly reacting in a very visible way to the exposure of this phone call. Why did we use skin fibroblasts? Well, because the skin is a kind of an antenna. And as a matter of fact, quite recently in 2018, this article was published in a journal entitled Environmental Research. You can find it in PubMed. So we're talking about official science, not fringe science. And in this article, the title tells you all: the human skill as a sub-terahertz receiver. Does 5G pose a danger to it or not? And we remain a little bit for a while with a question mark. Talking about the skin as an antenna, and since we are in 2021, we cannot skip this article that was published by an esteemed colleague of mine as a senior author, Professor Torello Lotti, who used to work at the University of Florence, Italy, in the Faculty of Medicine at the time when I was working there. And this article is fascinating. First of all, because it has been promptly retracted. So as if it was saying something that is not good to be seen. And secondly, because it poses an interesting question. 5G technology and induction of coronavirus in skin cells. You can still find the article available online, and it's fascinating to read. I have no ways to say whether their findings are reproducible or not, whether retraction was a matter of opportunity or what, but definitely something worth studying, if nothing else, to understand the reasoning behind this article. But if we go somewhere else in the world, if we go to Minsk in the Republic of Belarus, a former Soviet Union, we find something very interesting concerning 5G and COVID-19. This article is entitled Correlation Between the Potential Electromagnetic Pollution Level and the Danger of COVID-19. And it is published also in English, and not only in with these characters that I am unable to read. And again, also these can be downloaded for free. And I think that one of the parts in the results section is quite interesting. Today, one cannot fail to see the area correlation between the use of recommendations and the distribution of lethality from COVID-19. In particular, they report an analysis of the World Health Organization that indicates that in a group of countries where, according to data, hygienic restrictions on radio frequency, electromagnetic fields, that is where the EMFs are regulated, the relative level of lethality from COVID-19 is from 1 to 5% of the number of the infected. But in a group of countries where the hygienic regulation of electromagnetic exposure is carried out in accordance with corporate recommendations, the level is 5 to 20%, so about 5 times higher. So it's very interesting to check, to study, and to address this problem. What is the correlation, if any, between 5G and COVID-19 lethality? And I recommend you take a look at this article because it's quite interesting. But let's go back to my research in this field. And let's move from the skin to the microbiome. The first time that we thought that the microbiome could be involved in the damage exerted by electromagnetic fields on human bodies was published in the Encyclopedia of Cancer in 2017, together with my colleague from the hospital in Prato, a little town near Florence, Italy, Stefano Terini. Now, the Encyclopedia of Cancer is probably or arguably the most prestigious encyclopedia in oncology, that is, that it collects all works on cancer research. And this is the very first time where we describe how electromagnetic fields, they might affect not only our human cells, as we had demonstrated in 2002, but also, and maybe more importantly, also the cells of our microbiome, the microbes, the bugs, as somebody calls them, that are resident in our gut, in our skin, in our brain as well. As a matter of fact, the microbes of our microbiome are extremely sensitive to electromagnetic fields, up to the point that they are sensitive to the physiologic, normal, healthy magnetic fields that we do produce. Yeah, I think everybody knows that we produce electromagnetic fields. The electrocardiogram, the electroencephalogram, all these things are due to the movement of charged particles that emit electromagnetic fields. But even our intestines, since they move, because they move and because there is a nervous signaling through synapses with chemicals that induce the movement of charged particles, they emit electromagnetic fields. Well, the microbes in our gut, they are so sensitive that they are sensitive even to these physiological EMFs, with the advantage that, of course, they co-evoluted together with us, and therefore, to them, these physiological EMFs are no danger. But nevertheless, they perceive our physiological EMFs. So if they're able to perceive our physiological EMFs, think how affected are they by all the man-made artificial EMFs that surround us and surround them. This is the original article that was published in 2006, where it writes that Escherichia coli, which is a common microbe in our gut, but also colon cancer cells, they are sensitive to the normal physiological healthy EMFs produced in our gut that induces a kind of a defense response through the induction of the so-called heat shock proteins. In other words, the microbes in our guts, they perceive the EMFs and they respond to them. As I said at the beginning of my talk, I live in Arizona, which is a wonderful state. And also there are many isolated parts of the state. If you go up north toward the Grand Canyon, you find the places that are far remote. Nevertheless, unfortunately, or fortunately, if you are stranded over there, the cell phone picks up the signal. So it means that even in these remote places, there is a signal for the cell phone. And this means that even in these remote places, we are surrounded by EMFs. So essentially, there is no way to escape the EMFs that surround us. How can we protect ourselves from these EMFs that, as we have seen since 2002, or maybe since my time in the army when I was working with radar operator, they do affect our cells, and now we know they also do affect the cells of our microbiome. Well, if we were talking about the ionizing radiations, the X-rays that I was using when I was practicing as a radiologist, that would be easy. Just interpose a lead shield between the source of ionizing radiations, X-rays in this case, and the target that is the radiologist, so that you are not hit by the X-rays. So in this case, it is easy. What about the omnipresent, pervasive EMFs that surround us in every moment? This moment, of course, I'm talking in front of a computer. I'm surrounded by wireless. I have my cell phone next to me. So I am surrounded by EMFs. How can I protect